live. Let's go.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for joining Office Hours today. We're going to get straight into the questions, I think, because we've got quite a few. I noticed one which is probably, it's not relevant, but if somebody has information, it might be useful. Resting Rich Face. That's an awesome name. Resting Rich Program. Does anybody know anything about the Ambassador Program? Martin's mentioned it briefly to me, but I don't know any more than that. No? Okay.
Nope.
Probably have to ping Martin on that, actually. I might just tag him now. And I don't need to worry about remembering to do that later. Right. And now we have some real good questions. So, Chris, welcome. Thanks for joining us on voice. You're muted if you're talking. So let's go through Chris's questions. Anybody's welcome to speak up who's on the call, who's got an answer for the question. So
I can go with the first. So
sure. So go for it.
He asks how to make your name display on testnet and mainnet instead of 0xID. Well, there's a simple guide. I can give you the link in just a bit. You basically have to interact with the GNS contract. Like first you set an ENS name, you reserve an ENS name, you buy it, and then you just simply go through 5 lines of instructions, and you should be working. Let me fetch the link.
Great, thanks. Yeah, as I noticed, a lot of hex. I think most people would prefer to put something there, so it's good to identify who the indexer is, right?
So ignore the name of the link, but if you scroll all the way down there, you will find instructions for setting up a name.
Awesome, thanks.
Cool.
Just to further to your point, Chris, I think you're very right in saying that it's important to make sure people know who you are on the test net, because that probably will be important down the line, especially if you're planning on or already running an indexer on mainnet. That's a pretty clear demonstration of commitment to the network if you're running on testnet and running on mainnet. So contributing to the new releases as well as running on mainnet. Okay. Second question, when using the graph command line interface, how do I specify if I want to operate on testnet versus mainnet? Anybody like to take that?
You don't need to specify in the graph CLI. There's in the indexer agent and indexer service, there's an environment variable for each of them where you specify the network, and then the indexer service and the indexer agent will take note of that environment variable. I believe it's called indexers agent Ethereum network or something like that. Ford might correct me if I'm wrong, but I can give you, if you look on the StakeSquid repo that we have for the testnet, I believe you will see in the indexer agent and service environment variables that there's a field with Rinkeby in there. That must be set to mainnet for mainnet, obviously.
Yeah, just to add to that, the field is called Ethereum network if you use it as a startup argument, but if you use the environment variable, it'd be indexer agent Ethereum network.
Okay, cool.
And that defaults to mainnet, actually, I think.
Yeah, I was going to ask if it's something new, because I don't know if I even specify that in my startup on my mainnet agent.
It's been around just after we launched on mainnet, but since it defaults to mainnet, you probably haven't even looked at it.
Okay, so I'll take a look at the repo there, Payne. Thank you.
Awesome. Question number 3 is, how do you register your node on the mainnet? The indexer agent takes care of that. The first time you you put everything up, the first transaction that it makes is to register on the network. It's automated as far as I know.
Yeah, so the with the testnet, I don't know if it's. I assume the testnet's permissionless. Although you do need to register, don't you, in order to get some testnet GRT? That's the purpose of registering on the testnet.
Yeah.
In theory, if somebody else was to give you some testnet GRT, you could fire up an indexer permissionless.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Last question. Once you have everything successfully running and have allocated to the pool together subgraph, how do you collect indexing rewards and query fees for yourself and your delegators? I would like somebody else to take this question, please. Any number of people here who can answer that.
I can go with it.
Yeah, I want more people to interact, if possible. There's many names on here who can answer that question. I'm going to pick one if nobody says anything. All right, Cohen. You want to explain this one?
The third one, right?
Fourth, yeah.
Yeah. Want me to read it?
Well, it goes automatic. Do you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
It goes automatic every 28 days on mainnet if you're with one parallel allocation, or every 14 days if you're with two or more. And otherwise, you can stop your subgraph in your indexer CLI and then start it again.
Yeah, so you can either leave it to automatically claim them for as your agent is running, or if you want to manually kick off the process of calculating the rewards out of the smart contract, you can. What you basically do in the command line interface is you disable the pull together. Can you turn down your speakers, please, Dirtbike? Thanks. So what you would do is you would disable the pull together subgraph using the graph command line interface. Take a look at what your agent's doing on chain to make sure it's closing down the settlement, and then once the settlement's closed, then you can reallocate with your new, if anything's changed, like you've increased your delegation or reduced your delegation, you can sort of
I can do a faster TLDR than that. You just need to set it to decision basis never, then watch the agent logs for when it closes the allocation. After it closes the allocation, we can just reallocate back. And for the query fees rebates, they are automatically connected 7 epochs after the allocation was closed.
How long is one epoch?
1 epoch is 24 hours approximately.
Okay.
It fluctuates because it's based on Ethereum blocks. Sometimes the blocks go faster, sometimes they're slower. So it's approximately 24 hours.
Okay. And so when you close out the subgraph, then at that point it distributes whatever was kind of collected up to that point out to the indexer and to the delegators?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And the reason I asked this question is I know I've seen a lot of comments about, hey, I've been waiting forever, I've been delegated and I haven't gotten anything, and it's been several days. And the answer is, okay, they're going to wait until the 28 days to close out. It's the most efficient cost-wise.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to get a feel for, like, maybe going faster gives a little more confidence to those who are delegating to see, okay, they actually closed out once, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, well, you have to also keep in mind that when there's going to be more subgraphs added on chain, you will pretty much have to go through the 28 days period, especially if you allocate towards many of them, because the costs of operating scale up linearly. So I was mostly trying to educate delegators that this will happen in the future. Like you're gonna have to wait for the whole 28 days period to pass before you see any rewards in the UI, because it's not pretty cost efficient to do it every day or every week.
So when you said scales linear, that's linear with the number of subgraphs that you're running?
Yes. So it's around $50 to $100, even more depending on gas price, to allocate to one subgraph, only to open the allocation, and then another of that number when you close it. So
So it scales with parallel allocations
okay, yeah, indeed.
rather than multiple subgraphs. And that would give you your, assuming you're using the same parallel allocation on every subgraph. But for every allocation you have, every parallel allocation you have, there is going to be a transaction, an on-chain transaction associated with settling that. And it's like Alex says, it's all fair and well doing that on the daily right now, while it's one transaction. But as we scale up and have more subgraphs, that becomes, significantly greater cost, which most of us, I imagine, will find a balance between when to settle in order to give confidence to the delegators, and what's the most practical frequency based on cost. Because it is going to get expensive, assuming gas costs stay high on Ethereum. Right. One last question from Chris. How long do you recommend operating on testnet before moving to mainnet? So testnet is the testnet that's running right now, is a continuous testnet. To my knowledge, it's going to continue to run alongside mainnet for the purpose of testing new stuff before it hits mainnet. So unless anybody has any other knowledge that I don't have, then testnet is going to continue to run alongside mainnet permanently.
Yep, confirming that. The testnet is now like a development net, so we'll be using that to test any updates to the protocol or contracts or indexer components, and then provide a testing ground for you all to test out your infrastructure.
So is there likely to be waves forward where, you guys are going to be requesting feedback on specific software upgrades that you're doing on testnet, or is it just going to be like a continuous asynchronous, post issues on the GitHub type of process?
Right now, it's a pretty continuous kind of ad hoc, but as we start to see more proposals coming through the pipeline, those will hit the testnet first, and we'll naturally have periods of testing and feedback from everyone that's participating.
Yeah, cool.
So if I could, I'll ask a slightly different version of that. Is how long did each of you, or those who are willing to kind of speak up, how long did you operate in testnet before you felt comfortable making the switch over to the mainnet?
It was a different testnet though. It was a 5 or 6 month testnet in which we were actively working to get the launch date. So it's not the same as the testnet.
Yeah, I don't imagine we have anyone on, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're on here, that has spent time on testnet and has moved on to mainnet. Testnet's only really been running for, a month maybe? The current testnet?
I think less than that.
But I'm looking forward to the stories, Chris, of people making the transition after they spent some time running on the testnet and then moving over to mainnet. That's part of the reason the testnet exists, I think.
Well, to be honest, I would always recommend starting on testnet first, just to have a feel of how everything is set up and how everything works before you jump on mainnet, because like on mainnet every single thing that you do will cost you gas in ETH basically. So
yeah, unless you hate money, start on the testnet.
Exactly.
And pray to
All
the
right.
Rinkeby whales.
Well, thank you guys for answering all those questions. I appreciate it. That's very helpful to me. So,
If you have any more questions, just feel free to ask us.
Yeah, if anything
yeah,
else
I'm
comes to
sure I
mind.
will. Yeah.
Right, let me scroll up now and see where we're at. Okay, so Stake Machine has quoted something from the Ethereum blog about the Berlin hard fork. Let's get the elephant out of the room first. Geth 1.10 does not ship the Berlin hard fork yet, as there are some 11th hour concerns from the Solidity team about 2315. Since this is a major release, we don't want to publish it too close to the fork. We will follow up with 10.1 soon with the final list of EIPs and block numbers baked in. So what does this mean for us? I don't have a clue what this means for us. Does anybody have a clue what this means for us? Stake Machine, you probably have some idea what it means, or Sebastian.
I would say nothing changes until further notice. Like when the Berlin hard fork doesn't come, then we can run our parity nodes into oblivion, and we will have time. Like they will not publish an updated version with baked in that are like 3 weeks in the future, right? They will probably give like 2 months notice or something. And I'm running. Like my backup node is running now on Open Ethereum 3.2 RC1, and yeah, it's looking fine. I don't know what kind of bugs will be potentially able to like destroy our indexer database, so that proof of indexing could fail and we get slashing events. I think there's like a lot of things that have to go wrong for this. So running with a potentially alpha release on also Open Ethereum 3.2 might be not the worst thing that could happen to us, and it's available now, so I think we are all safe. The only thing is that TurboGuest still would be better because only 2 terabyte of disk required.
1 terabyte.
Yeah, you have to account
one
for
and something. Yeah.
next year.
But we're still a long way from that, right? So we're stuck with Open Ethereum for now. In fact, I'm just watching my Open Ethereum node fail and restart itself as we speak. Something I wanted to ask you, Sebastian, was that I know that I've now second Open Ethereum 301 node running for the specific purposes of being able to try out the upgrades. So I still, so I continue to have a working node that I don't mess with. So if I've got a 301 node today, how do I get that to where you are now, 3.2 RC1?
Like the way I did it was I went to GitHub, like cloned the repository, install the Rust toolchain and something on the machine, and then just compile that thing and replace the path in the systemd script to get it up and running.
You need to do 2 things basically. You need to install the new version, and you need to run the database tool that you need to compile yourself on your database, and that process is quite okay explained in the corresponding GitHub.
You are speaking to upgrade from 3.01 to 3.2, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there is like this conversion step which like first upgrades your database from 3.01 to 3.1, and I think you can just run the new alpha release candidate on top of it.
Okay, so the reason I asked for that to be outlined is because I had got the impression that the script for making the database change was not recommended route to go through. So that's actually in the repo, then that script is in the repo, and I can get my hands on it from the Open Ethereum repo.
Yeah, the recommendation is to have backups to begin with. And of course, if you can sync from scratch, sync from scratch. But yeah, I've used the tool 2 or 3 times want to go from 3.0 to 3.1 dev branch, and once from 3.0 to 3.2, the release candidate, and neither have any problems. My 3.01 dev has been running on testnet, graph testnet, for significant amount of time, 0 issues. The 3.2 release candidate, it's running, but I haven't really tested it yet.
Okay, brilliant. One last question about this. I have very little space left on this test server, so I have maybe 500 gig left out of the 6.5 terabyte it's using already. Is that going to be a problem for upgrading?
No.
Surprisingly, it takes very little, it seems, and it's quite fast.
Okay, that's good to know.
Like, it's the database in place. That's why you need a backup, and it takes like seconds.
Okay, you've put my mind at rest a bit there. Even though I have backups, I'm just worried if one of them breaks. Just because of the nature of 7 terabytes and moving 7 terabytes around, even when the backup breaks, it's still a nightmare to try and get the backup back to,
rsync it. Like, I think rsync make hash sums of every, and then you should be safe. And the only real solution is more backups.
Yeah, you can use ARIA2 or something like that if you don't want to use rsync. I think Sebastian was using it quite frequently, and it's way faster.
There is a trick. Yeah, there's a Python script that I found somewhere that I'm just using now, which pulls the list of changed files via rsync, and then you open an additional HTTP server and mount your database folder, and then you use the file list from rsync to download over HTTP in parallel. Like with ARIA2, it's a command line tool that can download 16 files in parallel. And because those chunks are so small, like 64 megabytes or something, you have like a lot of files, and the only way to fill your 1 gigabit connection is basically by downloading in parallel. But rsync itself cannot do this, so there is this workaround. I can share the script probably if someone asks for it.
Yeah, that would be interesting, because I just put together a 10 gigabit network here, and it still took like 3 hours via rsync to move the 7 terabytes across. So if I was able to do it in parallel, that would speed things up considerably. Do you do any sort of live mirroring of your nodes, Sebastian?
Live mirroring of ETH nodes?
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is, if one of your ETH nodes goes down, do you have an exact copy that's also running elsewhere?
Yeah, I always run a second ETH node.
Yeah, it's basically just running different nodes in parallel. It's not necessarily just mirroring the disk. We have multiple ETH nodes, and we have multiple backups for them.
Okay, let me scroll up here.
The thing I found with Ethereum or with Open Ethereum backups is that every once in a while, normally the backup is quite small, like 50 gigabyte in 24 hours or something. But every once in a while, it does something weird, and I think it's related that it goes into slow state sync. Basically, it refreshes the entire dataset, which means your incremental backup is pretty much a full backup again.
Right.
Which is also important to know. If you do snapshots, you can really shoot yourself in the foot like that.
Yeah, I was considering snapshots as well as ZFS snapshots, but was worried about the size, even though, it's a differential.
Yeah, it goes fine for weeks on end, and then the 3.0, it looks like it refreshes the entire dataset because, well, it fills up the disk like crazy, and I noticed that if I try to do a differential backup, I'm basically sending the entire set over.
Yeah, so it's just there's no point really in trying to do a differential in that situation. It's interesting.
You also always have the possibility to spin up a quick node in 2 days or so. So the ultimate backup stays the blockchain, and you can always start syncing that stuff again and just pay the $1,500 or so.
I mean, there are cheaper options. Chainstack shared archive is an option. Obviously, it's shared, so you're going to get throttled. You know, do
they support those EIP?
I don't actually know.
That's
but
a good question.
And traces?
They definitely support traces. I was using them for a while. In a pinch, I guess they would be okay.
Interesting. So I think we should also gather some data about different ETH providers, hosted ETH providers, because I have them in my Docker guide, but I never finalized a table for them. If anyone has any more details about, let's say, Infura, Chainstack, QuickNode, and all of that, maybe you can send it my way. Like, for example, if it has EIP support, the call by ETH hash or whatever it's called, and traces and everything like that, just send it my way if you have any details, and we can compile that table together.
It's probably about time to do a refresh on that anyway, because I certainly haven't looked at them in anger since Mission Control. We were all desperately scrambling to find a way to access an archive node that wouldn't cost us $1,200 a month.
My experience with the shared Chainstack node during Mission Control is that it handles like a few subgrabs okay, but the moment you throw on some like 5 or 10 or some of the bigger ones, it even struggles to keep up with the chain head. So I'm very happy to say that I have my own pair of ETH nodes, so that I have hopefully no need to ever go back there. But yeah, I understand it's not as easy to do that sort of thing.
You do not really want to be going there. It's a last-ditch sort of thing to keep your service running, right? You need 2 backup plans before you hit that one, really, as a last-ditch effort to keep your syncing up to speed, up to the chain head. Okay, let's move on from. We're halfway through the hour, so let's move on from ETH node chat, and let's see what else we've got.
One more thing.
Go ahead.
If you lose your QuickNode needs 2 days to spin it up, and if you lose your archive node, you're not immediately losing out on rewards. You just don't close your allocations and wait for your ETH node to be back.
Well, not entirely true. If we were maybe 6 months to a year down the line, and there's 100 subgraphs, and you're making great money from the queries, as soon as you leave the chain head, then most people are going to say goodbye. I'm not interested in your business because you're half an hour behind the chain.
Yeah,
so you lose all the query fee business.
Of course. Yeah, that is how it should be done. But I also wanted to point out the realistic scenario right now.
Sure. Good point. Okay, let's move on. What else have we got in the way of questions? Dan, are you on voice?
Yeah, I think he can hear us, but probably doesn't have a mic.
Okay, let's go through these questions, and I'll put these questions out there, and then whoever would like to take a stab at them can go ahead. So from Dan Cube, if we are going to be moving on to the meatier questions, I have a couple. GRT per effort or GRT per time? I've forgotten what it's called now, but it's been a while since I looked at cost models. I remember last time I looked at this was an important variable, as it basically seems to determine whether your costing is going to net you a profit or you are breaking even. How do you guys work out your GRT per effort? Is this even possible without query volume? So we're talking about Agora, right? The cost modeling tool. that Zach created for inputting historical query data, and allowing you to sort of test your cost models. And one of the variables that you could set in Agora itself was GRT per effort, where effort is the amount of time spent in the database in milliseconds. Beyond that, how it's used was always quite confusing to me. I usually just set it to 1 personally, so I could get a baseline sort of idea for queries that were always going to take 1 millisecond in the database. I don't know if anyone else has gone any deeper with GRT per effort. I know Zach has at times expressed regret at having GRT per effort as a feature. Does anyone else have any comment on that specific question? If not, maybe we can see if Zach would join us next week to talk more about Agora. Maybe give us an overview of where it's at, and maybe for the benefit of folks who weren't here for Mission Control, maybe he would do a run through of his presentation. I could have a chat with him and see.
That would be nice.
That could be a good idea. I wonder if this is the right forum for that, but I definitely think revisiting some cost model details would be good now, since we really only got deep into that discussion during the original testnet.
Yeah, so maybe it's actually it's bigger than just office hours. It's more of a top level thing, right? That's what you're thinking?
I'm not sure. I'm open to your guys' ideas. I think the people here would be most interested and ready to dive into that. So this might be a good place for it.
I mean, to be honest, it's also recorded, so yeah, we can just share it around with anyone that wants to learn and watch at a later time. So it doesn't really matter.
I think one important point is that this variable in the command line is just expressing what you actually want to earn per millisecond computer time spent, and then you match it with the price that you set in your cost model to see if with the past data you will earn that much, or like what's the difference of what you want to earn and what you would earn if you set it like this. So it's not really determining how much you earn, it's just your expectation.
How much you're going to charge per effort, and if you don't meet that threshold with the data, then you're not going to get paid for that transaction. Or you're not going to serve that transaction and get paid for it.
Yeah, but Agora is also just looking at a set of queries that you had in the past, right? So
Yeah, no, it's
With
not
effort
set-
beside them, they all have that time spent in the database. That's added to the data with QLog, right? Probably getting a little bit too into the weeds here now for this session.
Okay.
I think it would probably,
Definitely.
like Ford says, we would benefit from an external session here.
Yeah, I would love.
I am curious to hear though. Are you guys or any of you using a higher level business model, a mathematical model for your business strategy to then feed into your cost models? I know we're not really doing too much queries yet, so maybe you're not thinking about that, but I'd love to hear what you guys are doing there.
The closest I got to doing anything like that was back when we were trying to work out, what are Edge and Node thinking about for, how much a query will cost? How do we work this out without them telling us anything? So I started putting together models pretty early on, like really basic stuff. Seb was involved with that as well. We would talk a lot about, how much does it cost to run an Infura node plus a Hetzner instance for a month? How much does that cost per millisecond, right? How much is that costing me per millisecond? How much time, database time is that costing me? And we would do these pretty basic models based on that sort of stuff forward. Personally, we didn't go much further than that in terms of trying to work out, what would be a reasonable cost. A reasonable price to charge.
The strategy. The turned pretty quick during the testnet into just
Your voice is interrupting.
the price up until they drop.
Your voice is
Sorry.
cutting out, Goldberg.
Yeah, you cut out. We didn't really catch that.
Is it better now?
kind of.
Yeah.
Okay, so the winning strategy was to just watch the gateways and see when was the cutoff price, when they drop off, and like slowly push up the price, and don't really care about your own cost, and just take as much as you can get.
That's a good point. And one thing to add there is that the gateways on the mission control testnet, it was operating based on like a single consumer that had a single set of concerns as far as security, latency, etc. So it was a lot easier to use that technique you just mentioned to find that threshold. But with a larger set of consumers, that will no longer be the case, I think.
Yeah, I mean, well, the way that I described it back in mainnet was, trying to price your queries on the graph at that time felt like you're standing in the middle of a room with no lights on and you're just fumbling around looking for a light switch. That's what it felt like. And it's only going to be that, but to the to the nth degree on, once you have multiple consumers in with various different priorities about the utility of a query. And I haven't seen anyone publicly talking in more detail about this, Ford. I think if anybody is, they're keeping it pretty close to their chest. Because it's real, that's real alpha for indexers, that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on from that question, unless anybody has anything else to add.
One thing to add is if you guys are thinking about, your business models and your query costing and you have ideas on how that could be made a smoother process, keep that in mind, and that could be maybe a good option for grants or proposals, because I know this is a source of complication, and it's never really going to be easy, but I'd love to find ways to improve it.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's go for Dan's second question. For those of you using your Docker setup, using the Stake Squid Docker setup, where does the Postgres database sit? I don't have a great familiarity with Docker. How would users of this back up and manage their database?
It's pretty simple. So right now, the database sits in a Docker volume. So you just have to copy that Docker volume. Is even named. I don't know what the name is. I think just Postgres, like the name of the repo and Postgres at the end of the folder name. But you just have to copy that whole folder to somewhere else. And when you want to restore it, you just, for example, on a new machine, you just pull the repo again, let it install, stop it, and then replace the folder, and you should be good to go. There's no.
So that's a folder sitting on the bare metal or whatever you choose to deploy.
Yeah, it's in libvar docker volumes. I think it's the path. I can't really remember exactly, but we can chat. Dan, you can DM me and I can look it for you. But it's super simple. I was planning to move Postgres out of Docker, but that's a separate, more complicated process, and I don't really want to get into more advanced stuff for the testnet right now, because the purpose of that guide was to get everyone up and running as fast as possible for the testnet. So, as a easier onboarding experience.
Okay. Last question from Dan. File systems. I'm looking at changing my file system to ZFS. Would you recommend running with RAID Z2? How do volumes work and snapshots with ZFS? I always like asking these questions. Anybody else here using ZFS for their indexer?
You seem to be the only nerd using it, so.
Just me. It's always just me. So RAID Z2. So first of all, what is RAID Z2? RAID Z is sort of ZFS is basically ZFS RAID. That's what the Z means. And with the it's actually a lot easier to understand than typical RAID.
numbers.
RAID Z2 basically means that if you have, say, I don't know, 8 physical or well, it could be virtual devices in a ZFS pool. A ZFS pool is just where you basically tell ZFS, I want all of these disks to make up one file system. So in that pool, you might say, right, these 8 disks make up this ZFS pool. RAID Z2, if you're to set up that pool as a RAID Z2 pool, what it basically means is that out of those 8 disks, two of the disks could fail completely, and you'd still be able to run the array because of the way it works. It works out the parity. What I would say is that if you're looking for redundancy, RAID Z2 on ZFS is the absolute minimum you would go for. It's never recommended to run production redundancy at RAID Z1. I think that basically comes down to a statistics game. I think that's why people recommend that. Me personally, I do run RAID Z1 in certain circumstances, but usually it's for stuff that is less critical. If, for example, you were trying to run a critical archive node for Ethereum for your indexer, you really want to start at RAID Z2. How do volumes work in snapshots with ZFS? I'm not really sure what you mean by volumes. ZFS runs on top of your existing file system. So you have this concept of virtual devices. It's a Linux term, really. So what you're actually doing in ZFS is you're wrapping up virtual devices into pools, and then you're choosing how you want that pool to work. Do you want it to have lots of redundancy? Do you want it to have a specific block size for writing to the volume? Do you want it to have compression, native compression? That's one of the ZFS. It's really up to you. It's super flexible, and you can do things on the fly with ZFS. How do snapshots work with ZFS? It really depends on the platform you're using. Some platforms will do all the ZFS snapshotting for you in the background, and you basically don't have to touch it. If you're just deploying it to, say, an Ubuntu bare metal, it's not going to be doing anything for you automatically. You would need to put some stuff in place. There's various different ZFS tools you can use to put the basic snapshotting stuff in place. At the absolute minimum, I would say that you want to put snapshots in place for any time you make a change to your before you make a change to a ZFS pool or whatever. Add more disks, change the compression. You want ZFS snapshotting to be on for config changes. So that means that if you screw up your existing ZFS pool, you can basically just turn time back and say, okay, I screwed it up, it's not working. Go revert to the previous snapshot. So at a minimum, I would do that. But then you can obviously bring on KVM snapshots, LXD snapshots. So you can automatically do snapshotting for everything that you put on top of ZFS, like your virtual machines and your containers. But it does take a little bit of effort. But like, nobody else seems to use it around here. I'm not sure why. I use it because it's so flexible and it has all the features that I need. I think it's only just in the last couple of years ZFS has come to maturity, and it's got a bad rep because it's been around for a long time, and previously it wasn't very well supported. So enough me going on and on about ZFS.
Isn't it adding more overhead or whatever it was called when reading through the data or writing?
You need to do a lot of tuning with ZFS if you want to do like performance type stuff. So, for example, the TurboGeth guys did some benchmarking recently on the latest alpha of TurboGeth, and what they found was with just the default, I think it's 128K block size, that's just the default when you deploy a ZFS pool, you had serious performance degradation when you were trying to sync a TurboGeth node, so something like 40% slower.
Yeah, I remember.
And that basically comes down to the fact that this is giving you you need to tune the system for whatever the application may be. So a very common thing to do is to tune your ZFS pool or part of your pool. That's another benefit. You don't have to tune the whole pool to one block size. You can tune different parts of it to what you need. So a very common thing to do is to do benchmarking on Postgres databases and then tuning your ZFS block size so that it's optimized for whatever type of data you've got in your Postgres database. That's one downside. The other downside people talk about is that for when you start out with ZFS, you need to kind of put a lot of capex in. You've got to spend a lot of money on the disks to start out with, and you need to be well planned ahead in terms of what your needs might be in terms of capacity for a specific pool. If you don't do those things, you can get into sticky situations where you don't quite have the capacity you need, and you can't fix it without spending quite a lot of money. So it's far from perfect. There's plenty of caveats, but it's a matter of trade-offs. What's most important to you.
Yeah, that's fair.
My only recommendation if you're starting out with ZFS is to experiment first. So, get a couple of cheap drives, put them in a ZFS pool and play around with it. Break it in test before you do anything in production. Okay, enough about ZFS, so let's move on. Where are we at for time? We've got 10 minutes left. I'm just going to scroll the questions because I want to make sure and give people a chance to talk about stuff if they have anything they want to talk about. Adding GRT to Gitcoin will be done. When will GRT be added to Gitcoin? Is there an assumption that it will be added? Does anybody know much about GRT, Gitcoin, if there's anything going on in that space? Okay, nothing to talk about for now. Okay, I think we're done on questions, so we've got 10 minutes. So I'd like to open to the floor if anybody has any specific questions they want to, or any topics whatsoever to do with Graph they want to talk about. Now is a chance to do so. And if not, I might try and pick.
Well, since I see Eva is also in the list here, maybe some update on the Graph grants that have been. I mean, in general, the process, not anyone in specific, but how is it going? Did many come in? When is it the first decisions coming? Basically, that sort of thing.
I don't know if she's around.
Probably trying to fix Discord now.
Let's get on one of your topics, Jim, in the meantime, so we don't waste time.
I'm trying to find my list. Okay. Yeah, it's probably worth trying to set temperature a little bit on the forums. I'd be interested to hear from people who've been engaging on the forums and how you feel about how it's running right now. I'm not going to say anything more than that and just leave it open to anyone who wants to talk about the forums and the proposals.
The forums are really not helpful, and the discussion just goes around in circles and circles. I haven't been really enjoying the experience at all, and I don't think that in its current state it's going to be helpful. It needs either more moderation or some kind of gatekeeping for who's allowed to post, or maybe like more visibility into how old accounts are and that sort of thing, because there's no sense of reputation or reputability for people posting, and the barrier to entry is very low to come in and just write 10 paragraphs in something for your favor. So there could definitely be some improvements there.
Anyone else want to add to that? Seb, you were mentioning it earlier today. We wanted to talk about this. Sebastian?
Don't think he's around.
Oh, is he gone?
Or
Okay.
maybe he didn't quite hear what Pat said because his volume was pretty low. And I see everyone else is complaining.
Yeah. You want to add anything here, Alex?
Well, I've said what I had to say today, but yeah, I think think the forum is a great way to discuss things, but it needs to be more strictly moderated.
I can add there. I agree. But yeah, no, I feel your pain, Pioneer Pat or Patrick.
I feel like people are not really used to write forum posts anymore because they chat more with each other, and then their posts get quite emotional, which might be okay for some channel in Discord, but not so much for this information that is quite durable.
Yeah. So it's clear that. Sorry, did somebody want to speak? Yeah, I think it's quite clear that we need some rules of engagement. It's been quite problematic over the last week. And there's always that issue in governance where, you know, when you open your governance up to everybody, then you're going to hear from everybody whether they're, what they add is valuable or not. So there's some kind of balance that needs to be struck between, listening to every single thing people have to say and then finding a way to channel the discussion productively.
There's tooling in Discourse for doing that. I think we just need to crank up the settings on it a little more.
Could you give an example?
Like, I've it's been a while since I used it, but I'm pretty sure there's like levels, right? And then based on your contribution, you can have more levels. So like preventing, you can only post this frequently until you're this level or something. I mean, I know that this stuff exists because Discourse is like the premier forum tool to use. So the tooling is, you just need to kind of dive into it.
The levels are there. So I'll look into that or reach out to you. Maybe you can also set it up if you want. But the levels the 4 levels are set up there. So that should be preventing anyone even like to show up and start posting everywhere.
Yeah, so I think everyone agrees that we know there's an issue that needs to be fixed. It's just a matter of having to think about how we fix it and make it a more productive space.
I wonder if some sort of posting templates could help. I noticed there was a lot of posts that didn't necessarily connect back to the original post, didn't necessarily have an explanation on how they improve the protocol or how it could be implemented. And so without those kind of anchoring requirements, the discussion was getting a little bit lost in kind of non-technical places and going to different directions. So maybe a template could help.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So a template. So when you say template, a template for proposing, but could you also have templates for responding?
Absolutely.
As well.
Yeah.
Try and make it a more clinical sort of discussion rather than just free form.
Yeah, like a lot of times I'm looking at a post, I have like very similar questions, like how does that improve this specific system? How could that potentially be implemented? Like there's a lot of general questions that should be maybe not always answered directly, but thought about before you answer. And so maybe we could have templates and ways to direct both the first post and the responses.
Yeah.
Any other ideas for improvements on the forum?
I think just to end on a positive note, that governance area of the forum is difficult, right? But besides that part, I think the forum has been a really great sort of center of focus for all kinds of things. Like that's where we do all the announcements for office hours. That's where all the announcements are for this week in the graph for curation and for indexing. So there's a lot of really great there as well. I don't want to end on a really negative note. There's lots of cool stuff happening on there as well. At the art section, the meme section, there's one specific guy whose name I cannot remember, but he does fantastic art pieces with GRT sort of themes in them. You know, it's a great place to see stuff like that. And fat, exactly, Slim. And fat.
Yeah.
Love that guy's stuff. That's just great. Really great stuff. I'm waiting for
that's
NFT
amazing.
versions.
Before we wrap up, wanted to comment. Eva is having trouble with the microphone, but she'll post an update about the grants question now written.
Cool.
Yeah, she's typing now.
Awesome. Okay, unless anybody has anything else, I think we'll probably leave it at that. We've got a minute left.
Well,
Okay, thanks
judging by
everyone.
the crickets, I guess we're done.
We're done. Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for your contributions. I'll see you again next week.